Hello friends, so today's video is going to be a list of some beginner to advanced fantasy and science fiction books, and it's kind of a little bit of a twist because a lot of times these sorts of videos, the way that they're structured is that they kind of start from the bottom of here's where a lot of people maybe have gotten into fantasy, here's maybe a series or a book that a lot of us read when we were younger, and as you're coming back into reading or as you're coming back into fantasy, as you're getting into some of those really epic series, here's a good progression. And I wanted to do something a little bit different. I wanted to structure this more so like an if you like this, try that, but progressively getting more and more epic in scope or a little bit more mature. One of the perks of reading both young adult and adult fantasy is I do feel like I kind of see a wide range of different entry points. And so for each of these, I'm doing 5 sets of 3. I'm going to start with the one that whether you're an adult or you're a younger reader or you're just somebody who wants to get into fantasy, here's where maybe you can start. And if you like this particular book at the beginning, here's where you can maybe build into other books that are like it. And the first set I'm going to mention would be starting with Warrior of the Wild, then Hall of Smoke, and then Shadow of the Gods. The thing that all 3 of these have in common is they're all very Nordic feeling. They have a large emphasis on the Viking culture, even though they are all fantasy. Warrior of the Wild, I've described so many times as just being so incredibly cute and precious and heartwarming, even though there's an axe on the cover and it's got a Viking flair to it. You don't normally associate cute and a Viking field together, but it's not truly Vikings. People aren't going on raids. Obviously, that wouldn't be cute. But in this particular story, we follow a girl who is living within this village that it's really important during their rite of passage that they accomplish what they're supposed to, and if they don't, they are kicked out of their village. And due to some things that were outside of her control, she does end up being kicked out. The only way she can come back into her homeland is if she accomplishes essentially an impossible task that she absolutely has no chance of accomplishing. So in other words, she's an outcast and she lives in the wild. If she tries to come back without fulfilling this task, essentially she won't get to go to Valhalla. And it's not straight up called Valhalla, but there's some parallels there. So in order to ensure that she has a chance at a good afterlife, she sort of just has to suck it up for this particular life. And while living in the wild, she encounters some other people who have also been kicked out of their villages, and they decide to band together and help each other accomplish their tasks so that they can all go home. And just the camaraderie, the friendships, and there is a romantic subplot, all of it together just makes this such a cute story, and I think I would have really enjoyed this when I was younger, and I enjoy it as an adult. From there, I think that Hall of Smoke would be a good next step. This is technically adult fantasy, so we are kind of making a big jump from what I feel was the younger end of young adult to full-on adult fantasy, and this one is a standalone, just like Warrior of the Wild, so they have that as well. I think standalones make for good entry points into fantasy in general because it's not so overwhelming and daunting like some of the big series. This one follows a woman who also has this relationship with gods and goddesses. She's actually a warrior priestess, and at the very beginning of the story, you are led to believe that she may or may not have been the reason why certain bad things happened to her village. And of course, within her village, there were people that she cared about, and now she is mourning the loss of so many things that she has always loved, and pretty much her entire life was within this village. And now she is outside of that village and she is trying to right her wrongs. So they have some similar themes, although this one is definitely more of an introspective story. We're following a character who throughout the book is dealing with grief while also having to question whether or not the gods and goddesses that she has always followed, if they really are superior to humans, and if they even really exist, and if they do, what's the extent of their powers. And then from there we have, like I said, Shadow of the Gods. I just feel like the way he captured the Nordic feel was fantastic, and the climate and the history and the lore and the way that the kind of violent lives of so many of these characters follow them even when they try to escape it. Pretty much everybody in the story is a warrior, and it's awesome. And I loved all of the characters at various different points. It is a multiple point of view story, so I think that's kind of a step up a little bit. You're following other characters, and for a long time, they don't seem all that related. And Also, there's a lot with the world and there's a lot with the lore. For the next set, we have These Violent Delights, Jade City would go in the middle, and then Engines of Empire. The way in which I feel all of these are tied together is that all of them have a family that is very prominent and holds a lot of power. I also think all of these are not your traditional fantasy settings per se. They all do something a little different, and they all feel a little more modern than you would expect from a lot of sword and sorcery type of fantasy. And if you prefer these different settings, I think that these are all going to be at least somewhat appealing to you. So with These Violent Delights, this is actually a Romeo and Juliet West Side Story retelling that takes place in 1920s Shanghai. You have one gang of people who are Russian and then one gang of people who are Chinese, and you see these people go head to head. However, this is where the Romeo and Juliet aspect comes in. You have two characters from both sides who have a past, who kind of care for one another, but are on opposite sides. I thought this would be a lot more romance heavy because of its retelling nature. However, there's this illness that is going around that's really violent and really disturbing, and in order to ensure both gangs are kept safe, these two main characters work together to try and help one another and themselves. This isn't necessarily as much of a beginner point as something like Warrior of the Wild. It's also not only a standalone. However, I think with this particular theme of these three, that this is a good place to start when it comes to the family drama, the gangs, the violence, those sorts of things. Like I said, from there, I think Jade City is a great next step. This is one that is currently very popular here on BookTube, and the third book in the trilogy recently came out, so if you end up liking the first one, all three of the books are out. But this is one that we follow a family who has so much power, not just against another rival gang, but their power seeps into their society. It seeps into their culture. It seeps into their government, and it even affects international government. So they have a huge amount of influence, and you're following various different members of this prominent family as they're trying to manage the gang. There's also a very interesting magic system involving Jade, hence the title Jade City. And in general, this one is a great character study. And what is really going to, I think, pull you in is not just the more modern setting. It's not just these gangs going head to head, but it's that family tension and the way that the author is able to write the relationship between all of the characters and the characters themselves. From there, I think Engines of Empire is a great. This is now getting into the epic fantasy. This is actually the first book in a series, and it only recently came out. I have a whole basically gushing review for it. I absolutely adored it. And it has, once again, a prominent family who plays a huge role in society. This one is a little bit closer to your traditional fantasy setting, although I've described this as being a combination of Game of Thrones and Final Fantasy XII, because you have airships and you have more emphasis put on advancements in technology and science, and using that instead of relying on magic to further society. So I really like that, but also there's a lot of the same way that Jade City dives into the economy, this one does as well, and it really shows the consequences of a powerhouse, technologically advanced society when not everybody is at that point, and the people that get left behind or the people that get used. And so we have this family, we follow a woman and her 3 adult children, and then you have one other perspective that pops up that you're like, ooh, this is getting juicy, and there's just so much to it that I absolutely love. Next up, we have Six Crimson Cranes, Ray Bear, and Black Sun. These ones, I think at surface level, it's a lot harder to see a connection because it's more about the feeling of these. I have described both Six Crimson Cranes and Ray Bear as they would make good Disney movies. It doesn't literally have to be Disney, but I think a lot of people know what I'm saying when I mention that. This one especially is just so cute, so heartwarming, just such a fun, adventurous tale. And Ray Bear I've described as being a slightly darker Disney feel, but it's still, there's something about it where I'm just like, I could see it being this awesome animated movie. Or nowadays you see a lot of times there's live action, but it's still got that sort of wholesome, family-friendly feel. And then Black Sun is definitely a huge step in the adult direction, but they have a few things in common. One, they are all non-European settings, or non-European inspired settings, I should say. And a lot of people have grown accustomed to European settings in their fantasy, and it's just nice to be able to read something that's inspired by different cultures, by different places in the world. But in general, I just think there's something about them that they're so fast-paced, you always want to turn the page. And with Six Crimson Cranes, starting with this one, this is young adult, but I think it could easily be read by middle grade readers. We follow a princess who, when she's supposed to get married, she does not want to marry this person. She doesn't really know them. And so she sort of abandons her obligations. And then this curse is placed on her and her brothers. And she doesn't know how to break this curse, but for every word that she speaks, one of her brothers will die. And she can't let anybody know of this curse. So she has no idea how she's going to possibly save herself and her brothers, but she is determined to try. Raybearer, I do think, has some deeper themes. Even within the side characters, sometimes things you won't dive into them really deeply. You won't take a lot of time to explore them, but they will be referenced, and the little the author says, she says a lot. And I, in general, once again, this is a story that I devoured. I just found it so fascinating. We follow a girl who, her mother basically brought her into the world by making a deal with a genie. And because of that, the daughter then has that, essentially you have to grant my wish sort of magic. And our main character, Tarasai, her mother, what she wants for the wish that she's commanding of her daughter to fulfill is to kill someone. The person she wants her daughter to kill is this really nice person. You don't know why she wants her to do this. And our main character, in order to accomplish this, she doesn't want to do it, but in order to accomplish this, because magic is forcing her to do this, she ends up becoming close to the person and she really likes them. And now she's trying everything in her power to not fulfill this. So you do see this sort of curse type of setup in both of these. Black Sun, it really is a very big step in the violent direction. The opening will give that away very quickly. It is one of the most disturbing but captivating, as morbid as that sounds, openings that I've ever encountered, and if you pick it up, you will know what I'm talking about. This one, we follow a few different characters. So once again, the going from one point of view into multiple points of view, there's that step up there. But also within this one, it's not so much that there's a curse, it's more that there is a prophecy. And we have a character that sort of believes they are the one to fulfill this prophecy. And you aren't sure if that character is fulfilling something good or bad, but you like them, and so you feel conflicted. So even though they're not all exactly the same, it's not a set in stone, here's a curse, break the curse. I think all of them have a curse prophecy sort of magic surrounding them, and in general, like I said, I think all of these are incredibly fast-paced. The next set, it's more science fiction dystopian, so slightly different than the others I've mentioned this far, but we have Legend, Scythe, and then actually I'm kind of cheating. This one's gonna be 4 books. We have The Ones We're Meant to Find / Fahrenheit 451. So starting at the beginning with Legend, this is a series that is very 100% young adult. It's got all of the young adult tropes. It's kind of a little insta-lovey at times, and it moves so fast. However, I think it's incredibly engrossing, and Marie Lu has so many interesting ideas. What's interesting about this one is, despite the fact that it's young adult dystopian, it has a lot of these tropes within it, it also is eerily similar to some things that have transpired over the past few years, or a better way to put it would be some of the conspiracy theories that we have seen arise in the last few years. They just sort of feel like things that happen in this book. So in this story, we follow a divided United States, and we have a character who is living among the privileged. They are a part of the military class, and we follow a character who is from the lower class. These two characters would be June and Day. June has absolutely been fed propaganda. The character of Day is within the same part of the United States as June. However, because they are within the lower classes, they're living a very, very different life. One of the things I really, really liked about this series is the creativity that you see later on. there are parts where the world starts to open up a little bit more. Our characters' eyes are being opened up to everything they've been told. And it's really, there's just some interesting things. I don't want to give too much away, but for example, there's one society that to get their citizens to stay in line, everybody wears these things that allow them to see what I'm going to call points above things, and then it'll be something simple like if you take out the trash or if you pick up litter, you get a point. And if you do bad things, your points are lowered. And then depending on your points, that sort of determines your place in society and what you have access to. And you're like, oh, that's really cool. Not saying I want that. I'm just saying like, it's so interesting. What a fascinating concept. And that's part of why I think that the next step up would be Scythe. Scythe is young adult. However, the themes and the way that it's written, I think it's one of those books that I can see so many people of so many different ages getting so much out of this. So Neal Shusterman is looking at a society where we have conquered death. We have made advancements in medicine that allow us to heal. We are no longer at war. There's no threat of violence really to anyone. We've conquered death, like I said. However, the only threat to mankind at this point now is overpopulation, and the genius idea is that we are going to have a revered group of individuals known as scythes who will go around and permanently end someone's life. So if they determine that this person is going to die, that person's, the things that allow them to heal, they won't be activated. And I know it sounds like a bizarre premise, as do most dystopian books, but I think that it's more so about looking at a society like that, how would mankind react? And as the story progresses, you see so many instances, again, like with Marie Lu in Legend, of the author's creativity shining. And something that people will do because you don't have really any danger is that there are designated restaurants that are, let's say, 50s greaser theme or something. And if you go there, it's guaranteed that somebody's going to punch you and they're going to be like, hey, what are you doing talking to my girl? And it's like, you have to force yourself to live through these fake creations. And something like that, maybe it sounded cheesy when I described it, but you have these little things throughout the story that they're not main plot points. There's just a world building detail. And I like those juicy, interesting world building details. I'm just like, what a creative idea. That's so interesting. And then from there, like I said, we have Fahrenheit 451 and The Ones We're Meant to Find. This is sold as young adult, and I think it's 100% in the wrong place. And I think as a result, readers that have gone into this have been like, this is weird. And it is. And I can't really even say that I enjoyed this one, but I found it very thought-provoking. And I think that's true of a lot of more adult and mature dystopian stories. They're more meant to make you think, less so to make you happy or to entertain. And with this one, we have two sisters who are apart, trying to find their way back to one another. One of them is believed to be dead, and as we're reading her perspective, it would seem she's stranded on an island. The other sister believes that she's dead, but wonders if she's actually still out there. And throughout the book, you get hints of what society looks like. It's broken up into different classes. There have been catastrophic natural disasters that have affected the way people live. And there are some people that live still on land, and there are others that live in basically cities within the sky, we'll say, to try and keep them safe from the natural disasters that are occurring. And so you have these two sisters within this story. They have their story within something much bigger. And then, like I said, Fahrenheit 451, I probably don't have to say a whole lot about this one. This one, a lot of us have read in high school, has a lot of those thought-provoking, wow, this setting is strange, what is even going on, people staring at screens, everybody living within a certain mold, and breaking outside that mold obviously is generally frowned upon. And just what are you willing to do to actually live? And I think a lot of these books sort of have that theme within them. The last set for today, these are all so fun, and if you like political intrigue, check out all of these if you haven't before. But we have Castles in Their Bones, the Seven Realms series, and Warbreaker. Intrigue is really the thing that ties these all together. I actually wouldn't say that Castles in Their Bones and Seven Realms are all that different in maturity level. I do think, though, that Seven Realms gets a little bit more epic in scope, whereas this one it really zeroes in on the intrigue. So this is actually a new release. I flew through it, and we follow these 3 sisters. Their mother, from the time they were born, they're triplets, has conditioned them and programmed them and taught them everything they need to know to fulfill a plan of hers, which is that when they come of age, they're all going to be married off to different places, and their role in all of these places is to essentially push every other country to go to war with each other, or to encourage them to do certain things that will cause them to crumble. And their mother's plan is, within all of that chaos, she's going to swoop in and basically conquer everybody. So they've all been trained in manipulation, in seduction, in whatever skills they need for the given places that they're going to. Within each of these places that they go to, the cultures are different. There is some magic in the story, and it's a soft magic system, but it's really not about the magic. It's really about the intrigue and each sister trying to play the game. Next, like I said, we have the 7 Realms series. This is a quartet. We follow Reza and Han. Initially, it actually is going to sound kind of like a more fantastical version of Legend, because Reza, she is a princess. She lives among the privileged, the upper class. And then Han is sort of a street thief, and he's a little rough around the edges. And there's actually a lot of similarities between these characters and the characters in Legend. However, I think there's so much going on with the intrigue in Reza's life, as well as because we have this character, Han, who's living outside of the palace. We see a lot of what's going on around the kingdom. And you follow these characters as they get to know one another, as their worlds collide, as they are maturing. And you're seeing them trying to navigate not only politics, but also there's magic involved. There's magical artifacts. They're trying to figure out magic, and they're also just trying to face all the threats that come their way. And there are some really tragic things that happen in this series, and you feel so bad for some of our characters. And also, there is a romantic subplot that I liked a lot. And then we have Warbreaker. I love Warbreaker. I think it's so fun. It is a standalone, so it's kind of interesting that with this one, as we got to the adult fantasy, we actually limited the amount of books. However, there is potential for a sequel in the future. And this one I would say is a little bit more similar in its setup to Castles in Their Bones, because you're following a person who has this marriage alliance that has sort of been set up since the time they were born. The difference, though, is that the person, the particular sister in the story, because we do follow 2 that are sisters, the one that has been groomed her whole life to fulfill this marriage alliance is not the one that their father sends to his other kingdom. He sends his other daughter, who he's like, I just don't like this one as much. And she doesn't know what she's doing at all, because she never studied anything. And then her other sister, the mature one who's always been trained, is like, I have to rescue her. She's clueless. And then you're following the one sister who's clueless as she's trying to navigate everything and figure everything out. And then you're seeing the one sister helplessly trying to accomplish a rescue mission. And even though they are apart, you just feel this sister bond. And then on top of that, you have some other perspectives. One that is definitely very mysterious and a lot more to do with the magic, of which, of all of these, this is the one with the magic. It's Brandon Sanderson, so it's to be expected. The magic is so cool. You also get a perspective that's hilarious. It is basically somebody who is seen as a god who doesn't believe in their own divinity. So there's a lot to this story. And even though you only have really this one city that you're looking at, there's so much to it. And there's so many intricate, colorful details within it, and I love it so much. I had so much fun coming up with all of these, and I do have a whole list of a bunch of other ones, so I'll happily do more of these in the future. I hope this was helpful. I hope you enjoyed it, and let me know if you have any of your own progression of, if you like this, try that, beginner to advanced. I would love to see which ones you think would be great stair steps. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you all later. Bye.